After 20 years in the company, a young colleague set me up in a meeting. He said, "Old people, it's time to go. You're always stalling our projects." My name is Susan Harper, and I've been with H&H Solutions for 27 years. I'm 52 now, and at this point in my career, I've pretty much seen it all. The company has grown over the years, from a small startup in the early 90s to a significant player in the tech industry. When I started, the office was a cramped, dimly lit space with a handful of desks. And now it's a sleek, modern office building filled with employees hustling around, chasing deadlines and bigger deals. I've never been one to shy away from hard work. I joined H&H right after graduating college with a degree in computer science. The first few years were a blur of learning, mistakes, and growth, but I stuck with it. My first big project was a disaster in some ways, but it taught me everything I needed to know about the tech world. The boss, Arthur Henson, recognized that I was committed and had potential. He pulled me into more important projects and gradually gave me more responsibility. Over the years, I became the senior project manager, the one who was called in when things were getting tough or when a client was unhappy. I have a reputation for getting results. I know how to lead teams, deal with difficult clients, and navigate the corporate politics that comes with the territory. I've overseen high-profile accounts, and I've delivered successful projects that earned me respect, both from my colleagues and the clients. I was always the one to go the extra mile, make those early morning phone calls to international clients, or stay late to fix a glitch before the deadline. My work spoke for itself. I wasn't just about the numbers or the contracts, though. I made it a point to help the younger staff get their feet under them. I took pride in training them, showing them the ropes, and giving them advice when they were unsure. I helped shape the culture of our department. I was the one people turned to for guidance, whether it was about technical issues or navigating the politics of the office. Over time, I became the kind of person who held the team together. I had this quiet authority, a mix of experience, knowledge, and compassion. But as the years passed, I began to notice subtle changes. When I first started, the office felt like a tight-knit family. But now, with each passing year, the younger generation was rising, and it was starting to feel like a new era was coming. The culture was shifting. There was an energy that hadn't been there before, a sort of hunger that I wasn't used to. I remember the first time I felt it. One of those little moments that you don't really notice at first, but stick with you in the back of your mind. I had just wrapped up a meeting with a client, and as I walked back to my desk, I overheard a conversation between two new hires. One of them, a guy named Kyle, was speaking loudly enough for me to hear. "Susan Harper," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "She's like one of those old relics, still holding on to the good old days when she actually had a career." I couldn't believe my ears. I've heard my fair share of gossip over the years, but that one caught me off guard. It wasn't just the words, it was the arrogance in his voice, the lack of respect. It stung, not because it was true, but because I had built so much here. I was the one who helped this company grow, who helped them secure the big clients, and this is how I was being seen? It made me wonder how much longer I'd be relevant. I brushed it off at first, though. Kyle was new, fresh out of college, and probably just trying to make his mark. But that feeling lingered. I kept noticing little things, a shift in the way people spoke to me, the way the younger team members would act like they knew better. They were quick to criticize and slow to listen. It was as if there was this undercurrent of competition, an idea that the old guard needed to make way for the new. It wasn't just Kyle, though. It was the others, too, the ones who had been brought in to give the company a fresh perspective. They had no experience, no history with the clients, and yet they were the ones being given the bigger projects. They were the ones getting the praise. And I was being overlooked, left to pick up the pieces. But for all the little signs that something was changing, I didn't let it affect my work. I still led my team with confidence, still brought in the deals, still kept my clients happy. I focused on the work because that's what mattered to me. The rest? Well, that would sort itself out. At least that's what I thought. But soon enough, it became clear that things were changing faster than I'd expected. It was early spring when Kyle first caught my attention. He had joined the company just a few months earlier, fresh out of an Ivy League school, with all the polish and enthusiasm you'd expect from someone just starting their career. But there was something about him, a kind of ambition that felt almost too sharp, too eager to prove something. I first worked with him on a project involving a major banking client, one of our longest standing and most lucrative accounts. Kyle was assigned as part of the team, but he wasn't exactly a team player. He wanted to impress, to make a name for himself. I noticed how he tried to sideline others' ideas, especially mine. At first, I chalked it up to his youthful drive. He was ambitious, maybe a little too much for his own good, but I didn't think much of it. I'd seen it all before. But then something strange started happening. Small, almost imperceptible things that seemed like coincidences. Files started disappearing from the shared server, or they'd appear with errors, things that shouldn't have been there. At first, it wasn't enough to raise alarms. Maybe a technical glitch. But as the weeks went by, I started to notice a pattern. Every time Kyle was in charge of an update or a document, there seemed to be a mistake, a flaw, and these weren't just small errors. They were significant, and they were damaging. One afternoon, I was reviewing a set of financial projections for the banking client. We were supposed to present it the next morning at a major meeting. As I went through the numbers, something caught my eye. An entire section of data was altered. It wasn't just an error, it looked deliberate. The numbers didn't match up with the reports we'd submitted earlier, and the discrepancies could potentially cost us the account. I didn't know who had done it at first, but I had a sinking feeling. I called Kyle into my office to discuss it. He was all charm, a wide smile on his face, eager to explain whatever mistake had been made. But I could tell something was off. There was a tension in his voice, a nervousness that didn't match his usual cocky demeanor. Kyle, I'm seeing discrepancies in these reports, I said, keeping my tone calm, professional. These numbers aren't right. I need to know who made these changes. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting to the side. I'm not sure what you mean, Susan. I've been working on these projections all week. Maybe it's a technical issue with the system. But something in his voice didn't sit right with me. I could feel the weight of the situation shifting. I decided to dig deeper. I ran a version history check on the document, and that's when I found it. The changes had been made during the time Kyle was updating the data. It was him. I didn't confront him immediately. I wasn't sure how to play this yet. If it was a simple mistake, fine. But if it was something more, then I needed to protect myself. I took the document to my supervisor, Greg Davis, the head of the department. He was known for being a bit hands-off, a guy who let his managers do the heavy lifting. But if I was going to bring this to light, I needed his support. I showed him the discrepancies and explained my concerns. Greg listened quietly, then nodded slowly. "We'll take a look at this," he said. "But you know how things are. We've got younger staff coming in. The company wants to change direction. Maybe it's time for the old guard to step aside." His words hit me like a slap, though he said them in such a casual tone. The old guard. I wasn't just dealing with a simple mistake. I was becoming the problem, the thing that needed to be fixed. Greg promised to look into it, but I could feel the shift in the air. It was like I was already being written off. And then came the meeting. The next day, the atmosphere was charged with tension. There was a full team meeting to discuss the projections, and the client was scheduled to join the call. The moment I walked into the conference room, I felt it. The air was thick with anticipation, but not in a good way. Kyle was already there, his usual smile replaced with something more guarded. The younger colleagues were all gathered around, their eyes shifting between me and the door, like something was about to happen. Greg walked in last, with a heavy sigh. He cleared his throat looking around the room. "We have an issue," he said, and my heart sank. "The projections are flawed. We've caught some discrepancies in the data. It looks like a leak. Susan, I'm afraid you'll have to explain this to the client." The words stung like acid. I was being singled out, and I knew it. I tried to defend myself, tried to explain what I had found, but my voice felt weak against the accusations. Kyle was sitting back, looking innocent but smug at the same time, his eyes gleaming with something darker beneath the surface. The room grew quieter, the tension so thick I could hardly breathe. Greg turned to me, his face hardening. "Susan, I've always respected you," he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. "But we can't ignore this. We need to make a change. The time of the old is over. We need fresh ideas. Kyle is the future, and you, well, it's clear this company is moving in a new direction. It's time for you to step aside." I felt my face flush with humiliation. The room seemed to shrink around me, every word they spoke sinking me deeper into the realization that I was being pushed out. They made their decision. There was no room for me anymore. The meeting ended, and the last thing I heard as I walked out of the room was Greg's voice, muttering to someone beside him, "We'll handle it internally." Internally, as if I wasn't even a part of this company anymore. I had been framed, and no one, not even Greg, seemed to care. The days following my dismissal were a blur. The shock of it all settled into a numb, suffocating heaviness that didn't let up. I spent the next few days packing up my office, a hollowed-out version of the space I'd once considered my professional home. My desk, once piled high with projects and notes, was now bare, save for the framed photos of my kids, the only things left that made the place feel even remotely familiar. But the worst part was the silence. No one called me. No one reached out to ask what had happened, to apologize, to offer support. The people I had worked with for years, the ones I had mentored, were suddenly ghosts. I had trained so many of them, helped them build their careers, but now they were all too busy with their own climbing ladders to care that the rung below them had just crumbled. I kept hearing the echo of Greg's words in my mind. The time of the old is over. It felt like the world had turned on me in an instant. My career, my reputation, everything I had worked for had been ripped away. And what did I have left? A severance that was barely enough to cover a couple of months' worth of bills. The worst part? I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror without feeling a deep, aching shame. How could I, a woman with decades of experience, get duped so completely? I had been too trusting, too loyal, and now I was paying the price. There were moments when the anger was so strong it felt like a physical weight on my chest. How had Kyle, someone who had barely been with the company for a year, managed to destroy me so efficiently? And the worst part was, I couldn't even tell anyone. The whole thing was so neatly orchestrated, so perfectly timed, that it looked like my fault. No one would believe me. They would just see an old, outdated employee being replaced by the shiny new guy. I sank into a deep depression. It was hard to admit it, but there were days when I felt like giving up. I'd sit at home, staring at my computer screen, scrolling through job listings, wondering if anyone would ever look at me the same way again. Who needed a 50-year-old specialist with a tarnished reputation? Who wanted someone with my experience when the world was obsessed with youth and fresh ideas? But then, one morning, After a sleepless night of staring at my phone, I snapped. I had spent too much time wallowing in anger and bitterness. It wasn't getting me anywhere. I needed to do something. I was not going to let this destroy me. I was done being a victim. I had been a project manager for over 25 years. I knew the ins and outs of the business. I had built teams, brought in clients, and delivered results. That wasn't going to disappear just because a handful of backstabbing junior employees thought they could take me down. So I started to think, if I couldn't make it in the corporate world anymore, maybe I could create something of my own. I had experience, connections, and the drive. I wasn't about to let one bad chapter define me. I decided to start my own consulting business. The first few months were hard. I was scared, scared of failure, scared of being irrelevant. I had no clients at first, no support system. It was just me, a laptop, and a few business cards I printed on my own. But I kept pushing, reaching out to old contacts, offering free consultations, trying to find anyone who would take a chance on me. It was slow. At first, I only had a couple of small contracts here and there, helping businesses streamline their processes, offering advice on project management. But little by little, things started to pick up. Word got out that I was offering practical, real world solutions that worked. Slowly, I started building a reputation as someone who could get things done. I'll never forget the day I landed my first big contract. It was a small tech company that had been struggling with project management inefficiencies. They were drowning in missed deadlines and poorly run teams. They needed someone to come in and fix it. I made them a deal. I would overhaul their system, train their staff, and ensure they got back on track. But I wouldn't charge them up front. I would only take a percentage of the savings they made from improved efficiency. They took the risk. And after 6 months of hard work, the company had streamlined its operations and doubled its output. The savings they made far exceeded my fee, and they became my biggest advocates. That was the turning point. More clients came. I started to build a small team of trusted consultants. I hired people who shared my values, hardworking, experienced professionals who knew the value of a job well done. My business grew slowly but steadily. Every day felt like a small victory, a step toward proving that I could succeed on my own. But my real victory came when I started to see the effects of my work on my former company. Slowly, quietly, clients who had once been loyal to H&H began to call me. They'd heard about the success of my consultancy, about the personalized attention I gave them, the real results. And little by little, I started to steal their business. The same clients who had once praised Greg's new ideas, the ones who had been wooed by Kyle's flashy pitch, were now turning to me for solutions. I wasn't taking clients from anyone who still valued the relationship I had built with them. But the cracks in H&H's foundation were becoming impossible to ignore. Their once loyal clients were leaving one by one. And when word got out that H&H had lost another major client to me, the truth started to sink in. The company was struggling. Kyle, of course, was still there. He had been promoted a few times since I left, always under the guise of being the future of the company. But the more I watched from the outside, the more I saw him flounder. He didn't have the experience. He didn't have the reputation. And when the company started to lose market share, his shine began to dull. And then came the day when I heard that Kyle was no longer with the company. Rumor had it that he'd been let go after a series of failed projects. The people who had once seen him as the future of H&H were now looking for a new direction. As I sat at my desk in my own office, looking out the window at the city skyline, I couldn't help but smile. The revenge I had sought wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't about confrontation or bitterness. It was quiet, it was slow, and it was absolute. I had built something. I had created my own success. And in doing so, I had taken everything Kyle had tried to destroy from me and turned it into something far greater than he could ever have imagined. In the end, my triumph wasn't just in business, it was in the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had outlasted them all. A couple of years had passed since I'd started my consulting firm. I had grown accustomed to the rhythm of running my own business. I didn't have the corporate structure I once did, but that was part of its charm. I didn't need it anymore. The long hours, the politics, the subtle games, they were all behind me. I was now my own boss, and for the first time in a long while, I felt in control. The clients kept coming. The word of mouth referrals had reached a point where I didn't have to chase business anymore. People sought me out. I wasn't just a consultant, I was a leader in my field. I had become the person I had always been at H&H, someone you could count on for real results. I'd built something meaningful, something sustainable. But there were still moments when I felt a little twinge of satisfaction every time I saw one of my former clients walk into my office. They would often apologize for leaving, but I'd always just smile and tell them, I understand. Truth be told, I wasn't upset. The relationships I had built over the years had meant a lot to me. And now, in this new chapter, I was getting a chance to prove that I could offer something they couldn't get elsewhere: integrity, experience, and a genuine commitment to getting things done. Then came the day when I received a phone call from an old client of mine. It was a big one, the same tech company I had saved from the brink of collapse. They were thriving now, and they wanted to re-engage with me for a much larger project. They were willing to pay me a handsome fee to help them expand their operations into new markets. The call itself wasn't the surprising part. It was the fact that they specifically asked for me. They'd already been offered a better deal by a larger firm, but they had turned it down. They told me they valued my expertise, my no-nonsense approach, and the way I had treated their employees with respect. It was one of the best moments of my professional life. As I sat back in my chair, the offer sinking in, something else occurred to me. The tables had completely turned. The company I had once worked for was now struggling, losing clients left and right. My old colleagues, the ones who had moved up after I'd been pushed out, were watching their own empire crumble. I had heard through the grapevine that H&H was facing financial difficulties, and it didn't take long to connect the dots. The clients who had once been loyal to them were now seeking me out. The work I was doing was leaving an undeniable mark, and the people who were once my competition were now being left behind. And then, about 3 years after I had left H&H, I got an unexpected call from my former HR manager. Her voice was shaky as she introduced herself. I, uh, I don't know if you've heard, she said, but well, he's gone. They've let him go. He couldn't make the numbers work, and the board decided it was time for him to go. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't just that Kyle had been let go, it was the way in which it had happened. He'd been fired for underperforming, for failing to live up to the promises he'd made when he took over the company. I couldn't help but think back to the day they'd forced me out, when I had been made to feel as though I was the problem, the outdated piece of machinery in the grand scheme of things. Now, here he was, the golden child of H&H, falling from grace. The irony wasn't lost on me. What Kyle had failed to realize was that success wasn't about the latest trend or the flashiest pitch. It wasn't about pretending to have all the answers. It was about consistency, experience, and a deep understanding of the work. And in the end, that's what I had. As I sat there, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, I thought back to the beginning. The humiliation of being pushed out of a job I had dedicated myself to for so many years, the doubt I had felt, and the moment I had decided to build something of my own. I had come a long way from that place of vulnerability and uncertainty, and now my business wasn't just thriving, It was surpassing everything I had imagined. Then came the day when I received an email from an old colleague, one of the few who had stuck by me after my departure. She'd sent me a simple message. I heard about Kyle. It's a shame, but I just wanted you to know you were right all along. You've built something amazing. We all knew you could do it. Those words meant more to me than I could put into words. It wasn't about the recognition or the validation. It was about knowing that I had proven without a doubt that I was capable of doing things on my terms. And then one last piece of the puzzle fell into place. H&H came to me. The board had realized they were in trouble. Their once loyal clients were leaving in droves. Their reputation had taken a hit, and they were facing an uphill battle they couldn't seem to win. They wanted to know if I would come back as a consultant. They had realized, too late, that the talent they had let go wasn't replaceable. The expertise, the insight, and the work ethic I had brought to that company had been invaluable. They wanted me to help them restore their standing, to help them win back the clients they had lost. It was a tempting offer. The money would be substantial, and it would be a chance to return to the company where I had spent so many years. But I didn't even have to think twice. I didn't need H&H anymore. I had created something that was entirely mine. I had built a reputation that was stronger than anything they could offer me. I politely declined their offer, and as I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but smile. Not in triumph, not in bitterness, but in quiet satisfaction. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, and in doing so, I had won, not just professionally, but personally. In the end, my revenge had been quiet. It had been methodical. It had been successful. But most of all, it had been sweet.